Whispers of the Tether by Whisper Quill. Chapter 10. The First Breach. The air was sharp with silence. Every bird had vanished. Every insect stilled. The only sound was the wrong kind of howling, ragged, hollow, scraping against the ears like broken glass. They came crawling from the border shadows. Wolves, but not. Their bodies twisted where fur gave way to exposed bone. Their eyes glowed like embers drowned in ash, and when they opened their jaws, the sound was nothing like a growl. It was a scream. "Positions!" Lucas's voice cut through the clearing sharp as steel. The pack shifted instantly, muscle and instinct snapping into place. Some wolves took human form, spears ready. Others let the shift rip through them, falling to all fours in flashes of fur and snarling teeth. Lucas didn't hesitate. His bones snapped, his form stretching, reshaping. A moment later, Jared stood where Lucas had been, a massive black wolf, taller than any of the others, his eyes an ocean storm, his coat gleaming in the moonlight. Faye's breath caught. She'd known he was strong. But seeing him like this, primal, absolute darkness wrapped in muscle, it rooted her where she stood. The corrupted wolves surged forward. Jared launched himself into them, a blur of black fur and raw power. He tore through the first creature with a single strike, his jaws crushing bone, scattering ash and rot into the air. Another lunged, twisted limbs snapping, but Jared met it head-on, driving it into the dirt with his weight. "Stay behind the line!" Elias shouted, his hand sweeping through the air. Runes flickered faintly against his skin, and a barrier of light snapped up in front of the younger wolves, holding back the charge of a second wave. Faye didn't move. Her blood roared in her veins. The earth pulsed beneath her feet, desperate, calling. She raised her hands, whispering words she didn't remember learning. The soil surged, roots ripping from the ground to snare one of the corrupted creatures. It shrieked, snapping its jaws, but the roots pulled tighter until its body cracked. Another came for her from the side. Too fast. Too wrong. Jared slammed into it before she could flinch, his teeth locking into its neck. The impact shook the ground. He ripped it apart, then turned to her, eyes burning, a growl deep in his chest. Not at her. For her. The bond hummed, alive, surging in her blood. She felt his rage, his pain, his fury at the things invading his land. For a moment, his heartbeat thrummed inside her own chest. "Lucas," she whispered, even though he wasn't Lucas right now. The battlefield roared. Wolves clashed with half-creatures. Snarls and screams and the crunch of bone filled the air. Elias burned through his strength, sweat streaking his brow as he held his barriers, shouting orders, pulling wounded wolves back from the brink. Faye turned back toward the forest, and her breath froze. One of the corrupted things wasn't attacking. It was watching her. Its eyes flared brighter than the rest, and when it opened its mouth, a voice slid out that didn't belong to it. "My blood," it whispered. The sound curled into her ear, smooth and cold. "Daughter, why do you fight me?" Her stomach dropped. The world tilted. Something inside her snapped. The ground split violently, jagged lines tearing outward from where she stood. Trees groaned, bark cracking, branches breaking under the surge of power. Roots lashed like whips, striking creatures and wolves alike. Wolves yelped, stumbling back as magic tore across the clearing. Elias swore, throwing up another barrier, but it shattered instantly under her power. "She's losing control!" The corrupted wolves froze for half a heartbeat. Then all at once they screamed. Her magic found them. Roots impaled. The earth swallowed. Flames licked up from nowhere. Every corrupted creature was obliterated in a single heartbeat, shredded into black ash that dissolved into the night. But the magic didn't stop. It raged out of her like a storm breaking, her body shaking violently. Blood streamed from her eyes, crimson against her pale skin, the cost of something too powerful for a mortal body to hold. The pack scattered, terrified. Only Jared moved forward. The massive black wolf stalked through the chaos, unflinching, even as the ground cracked beneath him and trees toppled. He growled once, deep, commanding, a sound that anchored instead of threatened. Her wild eyes locked on his. The bond surged sharp and unrelenting, yanking her back from the storm. His presence pressed against hers, a steady weight, grounding her. Her power shrieked one last time, then collapsed. The earth stilled. The vines went slack. The fire died. Faye dropped to her knees, trembling, smoke curling from her fingertips, blood still dripping from her eyes. The clearing was wrecked, gouged as though a god had struck it. Wolves stared at her, wide-eyed, whispering in fear. Jared shifted back, black fur dissolving until Lucas stood again. His chest heaved, blood streaking his arms, but he didn't seem to notice one of the younger wolves tossed him a cloak, and without a word. He pulled it around his shoulders before dropping to one knee in front of Faye, steady and firm. "Look at me," he said low, his voice rough with strain. "I am right here." Her lips trembled. "What's happening to me?" Around them the silence was heavier than grief. 3 wolves lay dead. 4 more injured, carried to the side by their kin. The survivors avoided looking at her directly, fear twisting into their grief. Elias crouched by one of the stains in the earth, his face grim. This wasn't just an attack. It was a message. He looked up, meeting Lucas's eyes. Calum's not only alive, he knows exactly who she is. The words fell like a stone into silence. Around them, wolves shifted uneasily. Faye felt their stares, sharp as knives in her skin. "She's dangerous," one whispered. "Witch blood," another muttered, low, fearful. "She'll bring ruin." Lucas's hand tightened on her shoulder, steady, unyielding. His voice cut across the murmurs, cold and absolute. "Not a word against her. She's mine to protect." No one dared answer. Chapter 11. The Council's Eyes. The night smelled of ash and iron. Faye sat against a fallen tree, her body trembling with the weight of what she'd unleashed. Blood still streaked her cheeks, hot and sticky against the cool night air. Every breath came shallow, as if her lungs were afraid to expand. Lucas knelt beside her, the dark cloak wrapped around his shoulders, barely concealing the cuts that ran along his arms. His hands were steady, though, when he dipped a cloth into a bowl of water Elias had set down and pressed it gently to her face. She winced. "Don't!" "Hold still." His voice was low, not unkind but unyielding. He brushed away the streaks of red, his thumb steady against her jaw, careful not to push too hard. Her eyes flickered up to his. Ocean blue against storm gray. The bond hummed faintly, quiet now but present, as if reminding her it hadn't broken when the storm of her magic had nearly destroyed everything. "You calmed me," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "You were drowning in your own flames. No one else could have stopped you." "That doesn't frighten you?" she asked. Her voice cracked at the end, soft with something that might have been fear or shame. Lucas didn't look away. "I've been frightened before. This isn't it." The words landed heavy between them. Faye swallowed, suddenly aware of how close he was, of the way his presence felt less like a shadow and more like a shield. Behind them, Elias cleared his throat. "We should move. The council's already gathering. And..." His eyes lingered on Faye, not unkind but wary. They saw everything. Faye's stomach dropped. She pushed herself upright, swaying on her feet. Lucas steadied her with a hand at her arm. She didn't shake him off. As they walked back toward the den, The whispers followed them like smoke. Witch blood. Dangerous. Curse-born. Words that pressed against her skin like thorns. By the time they stepped into the council hall, the air was thick with it. Marin, the eldest, rose slowly from her seat at the circle. Her eyes, sharp and ancient, cut through the murmurs. "So," she said, voice like flint, "the witch shows her teeth." Faye's jaw tightened. She wanted to speak, to deny, but the words curdled in her throat. Lucas stepped forward instead, his cloak falling heavy over his shoulders. "She saved us." "By destroying everything around her," Rourke snapped from the other side of the circle. His scarred face twisted with anger. "3 dead, 4 crippled. And you call that saving?" "She stopped Calem's creatures," Elias countered, his tone calm but edged. "Without her, more would have died." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber at the name. Calem. Even after 3 decades, it carried a weight heavier than stone. "You speak as if he's here," Rourke muttered. Elias's eyes narrowed. "He is. That hand in the ground was his. You all felt it." The chamber fell silent. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others lowered their eyes. Marin's gaze, however, stayed locked on Faye. "You carry Elira's blood. That much is clear. But whose side are you on, girl?" Faye drew in a sharp breath. Every instinct screamed to look away, to shrink into the shadows. But Lucas's hand brushed lightly against hers, grounding her, steadying her. "I didn't choose my blood," Faye said softly, her voice trembling but unbroken. "But I know this. If Calem rises, none of you will survive without me." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Her words had cut through the fear, but also stoked it. "She threatens us!" one of the younger councilmen barked. "No!" Lucas growled, stepping in front of her. His voice was sharp, final. "She warns you. There's a difference." Marin studied the two of them for a long, tense moment. "She's your mate." Gasps and murmurs instantly rose inside the chamber. Lucas's gaze remained fixed on Marin, determined and certain. "Enough!" Marin warned, and the room went dead silent. At last, she leaned back on her cane. "Then prove it. If she truly stands with us, let her face the trials." Faye stiffened. "Trials? The council will not follow a witch untested, let alone our future, Luna," Marin said. "If you are to fight beside us, you must earn the right. If you fail..." Her gaze flickered to Lucas. "She will be your burden alone." Chapter 12. The First Trial. The council chamber emptied slowly, voices fading into the stone corridors. Faye stood still, rooted to the floor even after the last wolf left. The fire in the center burned low, spitting sparks into the silence. Her hands were trembling. She hid them in her cloak, but Lucas noticed. He always noticed. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You didn't back down." Faye let out a shaky laugh. "I almost did." She stared at the flames. Her reflection wavered in the smoke. "They hate me, Lucas. They always will." "They fear you," he corrected. "That's not the same." Her emerald eyes lifted to his. "Isn't it?" Lucas's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he placed a hand over hers, steady and warm, still rough from battle. "Fear fades, trust doesn't, and they'll learn." For a moment, the tension in her chest loosened. She drew in a breath, held it, and let it out. "And if I fail these trials?" "Then they'll deal with me," he said, tone flat as stone. Her eyes widened. "You'd..." "Don't finish that sentence," he cut in. His gaze softened, just barely. "You won't fail." Faye wanted to believe him. The bond hummed faintly, urging her to. But somewhere in the back of her mind, The image of the black hand clawing through the earth lingered. Calum was stirring, and she was walking blind into the fire. Oy. They didn't wait long. By morning, the council had gathered outside the den, the circle wide, every wolf watching. The trial grounds were nothing more than a clearing at the forest's edge, ringed by stone markers older than the pack itself. Faye stepped into the center, her cloak brushing the earth, her heart pounding in her ears. Lucas stood at the edge, arms crossed unreadable, but his presence was an anchor. Elias lingered nearby, watching with the quiet intensity only he carried. Marin spoke first, her cane planted firmly in the ground. The trials are simple. Survive them, and the council will listen. Fail, and you will not see another dawn among us. Rourke sneered. Or she burns the whole forest down trying. Marin ignored him. Her eyes found Faye's. The first trial is restraint. Faye frowned. Restraint? Elias stepped forward, explaining. Your magic is powerful, yes, but power without control destroys everything. You must show the council you can wield it without turning it loose on us all. Marin nodded. There is a creature bound in these stones. Old magic. Dangerous. You will face it, and you will not kill it. If you can subdue it without ending its life, you pass. The crowd shifted uneasily. Even Lucas stiffened, though he said nothing. Faye swallowed hard, her hands curled into fists. And if I can't? Then the creature won't be the one who dies, Rourke muttered. The stones at the edge of the circle glowed faintly, runes sparking to life. The earth trembled, soft at first, then violent enough to shake leaves from the trees. From the ground something emerged, low and hulking, its form half shadow, half flesh. Its eyes glowed a dull red, its teeth jagged like broken glass. The wolves drew back instinctively. Faye stood her ground. Her magic pulsed low, restless, pressing against her skin as if begging to be unleashed. Marin's voice rang out. Begin! The creature lunged. Faye dodged, rolling across the dirt. Her cloak snagged, ripping at the hem. The beast snarled, claws carving into the soil where she'd stood seconds before. Her magic surged in response, wild and eager. She pressed her palms together, whispering a word, and green light flared across her skin. The forest bent to her call. Roots burst from the earth, tangling around the beast's legs. It shrieked, thrashing, but the roots held. The power wanted more. It wanted to crush, to burn, to end. Her vision blurred, a familiar heat burning behind her eyes. Blood. It wanted blood. No, she hissed through clenched teeth, forcing the magic down. The roots tightened, but she held them steady. Not killing, not destroying, just holding. The creature roared, shaking the clearing. Wolves snarled at the edge, ready to intervene. Faye! Lucas's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and grounding. Steady! She dug her nails into her palms, focusing on his voice, on the bond. The power fought her, surging like a storm tide, but she clung to that thread, Lucas's steadiness, the way his eyes found hers even in the chaos. Breathe, he commanded. She did. Slowly, one breath in, one breath out. The roots shifted, tightening around the creature's throat just enough to force it still. Its red eyes flickered, dimmed, then closed. The beast slumped to the ground, not dead, but subdued. The runes glowed once more, and with a hiss of smoke, the creature dissolved back into the earth. Silence fell. Faye swayed on her feet, the strain leaving her weak. Blood trailed faintly from her nose, but she wiped it away with the back of her hand. Marin's gaze softened, just barely. The first trial is complete. The circle erupted in murmurs, some shocked, some grudgingly impressed, others still doubtful. Lucas pushed forward, reaching her side before anyone else. His hand brushed her arm, steadying her. He leaned down, just enough for only her to hear. "I told you," he murmured. "You won't fail." Faye met his eyes. Ocean blue against emerald green. Her chest loosened, just a little. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 13. Shadows Between Trials. The clearing had emptied by dusk, but the echo of murmurs lingered in Faye's ears long after. Some had spoken her name with awe, others with suspicion, but all with the same sharp edge of fear. She sat on the steps of the den, cloak drawn around her shoulders. The cold bit through fabric, but it steadied her. Lucas approached silently, his shadow falling long across the ground. She knew it was him before he spoke. The bond whispered his presence, steady, like the low hum of a heartbeat she hadn't realized she was listening for. "You held back," he said simply. Faye glanced up at him, her emerald eyes faint in the fading light. "Barely." She rubbed her hands together, staring at the faint burn marks across her palms. "If you hadn't—" "You did it," he interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut off her spiraling. "Don't make excuses for your own strength." She let out a soft laugh, though it carried no humor. "They still looked at me like I was about to tear the world apart." Lucas crouched down so their eyes met level. His gaze, ocean blue and unyielding, held her in place. "Let them. Fear is easier to change than hatred. And after tonight, they know one thing for certain. When you fight for us." Her breath caught in her throat. The words shouldn't have meant so much. But they did. Inside, the council had gathered again. Not formally, but wolves had a way of circling together when their thoughts grew heavy. Elias leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, listening more than speaking. His sharp features were unreadable, though his eyes tracked Faye the moment she entered. "She controlled it once," Rourke was saying, his voice harsh and clipped. "What happens when she doesn't? When she burns half the forest and takes us with it?" "She didn't burn the forest," Elias said quietly. "She restrained it. That's the point." Rourke scoffed. "You'd defend her. Half which blood recognizes its own." The room stiffened. Insults in council carried weight. Elias's jaw tensed, but before he could respond, Marin's cane struck the stone floor. "Enough!" Her voice cut like steel. "The trial was set. The girl passed. That is the end of it." Rourke growled low, but said no more. Marin's gaze flicked toward Faye, unreadable. For a brief moment it softened, as though she saw someone else standing there. Someone long gone. Then her shoulders straightened, and the moment vanished. Later, Morgana found Faye alone in the outer hall. The old witch's steps were soft, but her presence filled the space like a shadow that had always been there. Her dark eyes, sharp as obsidian, lingered on the streak of dried blood at Faye's temple. "You bent the power," Morgana murmured. Not a question, an observation. Faye swallowed, unsure how to answer. Morgana's hand brushed lightly against her arm, grounding, though her touch carried the weight of centuries. "That blood of yours, it does not forgive recklessness. It devours. Alira once told me power was a river. You may drink, but if you dive too deep, it swallows you whole." "Alira," Faye whispered, the name heavy on her tongue. She wanted to ask more, but the word stuck. "Some things are better unknown." Morgana's gaze sharpened. "You are your mother's child. But remember, Calum is your father's shadow. Both live in you. One will rise. The trials are not just for the council. Child, they are for you." Faye shivered, though the hall was warm. Morgana's presence was like standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable. Before she could speak again, Morgana's expression softened ever so slightly. "Lucas steadies you. Don't lose that. It may be the only thing that keeps you from breaking." Then, like smoke, she was gone. That night, sleep did not come easily. Faye lay awake in the small chamber given to her, staring at the cracks in the ceiling as the fire dimmed. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the beast from the trial, roots tightening around its throat, her magic straining for blood. When the door creaked open, she thought it was Dream. But Lucas stepped inside, quiet, his shirt loose, his hair unkempt from restless pacing. "You should sleep," she whispered. "So should you." They stared at one another in the flickering half-light, silence stretching long between them. Then he spoke, voice low. "Tomorrow won't be easier, they'll push harder. You need rest." She pushed herself upright. "Lucas." His eyes met hers, sharp, unyielding. But underneath, there was something softer. Something he never showed the council. "You're stronger than you think, and if you lose yourself again..." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "I'll find you." Her breath hitched. The bond thrummed, alive and pulsing, like a string stretched between them. For a moment she wanted to close the space, to let the tension break, but she only nodded. "I know," she whispered. Beyond the den, the forest stirred. The wind carried whispers, faint but sharp enough to raise hackles. Shadows lengthened where no light touched. In the distance the ground cracked, and a hand, black, jagged-veined, pressed briefly through the soil before sinking back into darkness. Calum was moving, watching, waiting. And the trials were only just beginning. Chapter 14. The Trial Again. The chamber was silent, the stone walls holding centuries of whispered decisions. Elders and wolves alike formed a rough circle, eyes fixed on Faye. Every movement mattered. Every breath felt heavy. The air was thick with expectation and accusation. Lucas stayed at the edge, his black coat brushing the floor, muscles tense, eyes locked on her. She could feel the judgment of the council, the weight of the pack, the subtle pull of magic in the stones beneath her feet. Marin's voice cut through the quiet, brittle and precise. "Faye, stand in the center. The council demands answers." Faye nodded, hands brushing against the folds of her cloak. She inhaled, exhaled, ready, or as ready as anyone could be when everything, her magic, her past, and her future, was on trial. Rourke stepped forward, arms crossed, jaw tight. "We've tolerated your presence, your interference, but the wolves are still dying. You cannot claim neutrality." Faye met his gaze steadily. "I've done everything I could to help. Everything you refused to ask for." "She's young," Elias said quietly but firmly. "Her power is beyond what we've seen in generations. That alone is reason for caution." "You speak of power," Rourke snapped, "as if it excuses the cost. The boys are still dead." Faye felt a flicker of the old surge, the one she always feared. Her magic quivered beneath her skin, faint sparks, a restless hum. Lucas shifted slightly, claws flexing, the hair along his neck rising. She looked at him. His presence steadied her. "Lucas," she whispered, just enough for him. He nodded slightly. That small connection reminded her that she wasn't entirely alone. Marin raised her staff. "Enough. The trial begins. You will answer 3 questions, and your actions will determine the path forward. Speak truthfully." Faye drew in a breath. The first question came from Marin, voice sharp and deliberate. "Why did you cross into wolf territory without consent?" "I sought the boy," Faye said simply. "Theo. I felt him, his grave. I could not ignore it." A murmur ran through the council. The wolves shifted. Elias's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Rourke stepped forward. "You admit to trespass, but not to motive. How do we know you are not a threat? That your magic will not spiral again?" Faye's hands tingled. She remembered the creatures she had destroyed the last time her magic had erupted. The black hand, the jagged veins spreading, the power uncontrollable. She met Rourke's gaze. I control it better than before. But yes, if provoked, if cornered, it can break. And I cannot stop it alone. Lucas moved closer, shadowing her. I can, he said quietly, voice low. No one else can calm her. Not the council, not the elders. Only I can. The council exchanged wary glances. Murmurs grew. Faye met their eyes again. If that is a risk, then I accept it. But my intent is not destruction. It is protection. Marin's staff tapped the stone floor. Very well. Second question. Are you of wolf blood? A hush fell. Faye's fingers clenched. This was the truth she had long hidden. The side of her she had suppressed by instinct, by trauma from birth. Her wolf nature buried deep, untamed, a part of her she had never fully known. I am, she admitted, voice soft but clear. Half wolf. My wolf side, it has been dormant, suppressed. But it is there, always there. The chamber shifted. Rourke's eyes narrowed. A witch and wolf-blooded. This complicates everything. Lucas stepped beside her. It does not change her loyalty. She has saved lives, protected the pack. Her magic is hers, but her heart is with us. Faye felt warmth in his presence, that silent, unspoken assurance, that tether of trust. She inhaled, exhaled, ready for the final question. Marin's voice carried over the chamber, steady and authoritative. Third question. Why should the council and the pack trust you? Why should we not fear the power you hold? Faye paused, feeling the weight of every death, every grave, every boy lost. She remembered the first vision she had of Theo, his small linen-wrapped body, the pulse of sorrow in the earth beneath her fingers. She remembered the fox, the healing, the first stirring of magic she had never asked for. Because I am what comes after, she said finally. I am not Calum. I am not Alira. I am Faye. I have seen the cost of fear, of unchecked power, of silence, and I choose to act differently. I will walk with both witches and wolves. I will guide, not bind. I will protect, not dominate. And when I falter, she looked at Lucas. He will stand with me. A long silence followed. The council absorbed her words. Even Rourke's jaw relaxed slightly, though warily. Marin tapped her staff once. The trial concludes. The council will deliberate. Faye stepped back, letting the space breathe. She exhaled, shoulders easing. Lucas moved closer, brushing a hand against hers. No words, just presence enough. Elias nodded to her. The wolves will respect this outcome, but your bond and your half-wolf nature, we must watch, carefully. Faye inclined her head. I understand, and I am willing. As the council members filed out, leaving the chamber dim and echoing with footsteps, Lucas stayed. Black fur gleamed, eyes steady, human form poised. Faye looked at him, a small smile breaking through the tension. You didn't flinch, he said softly. I didn't have to, she replied. Not with you here. A flicker of warmth passed between them, quiet, deliberate. She could feel it, the pull of something deeper than magic, stronger than fear. But it was slow, careful, not rushed. It would grow. For now the chamber was empty, the trial concluded, and the world outside remained tense. But she had survived it. She had spoken her truth. And Lucas, ever the shadow at her side, would be there for whatever came next. Chapter 15. The Echo of Power. The council chamber emptied, leaving a hollow quiet that seemed almost deliberate. Faye remained in the center, her palms brushing the stone floor, feeling the faint hum of magic beneath her fingertips. It was alive, restless, a whisper of what she could do and what she must restrain. Lucas stayed at the edge, in human form, but his presence carried the same weight it did in wolf. Every time she looked at him, the pull was there, steady, grounding. He didn't speak, and she didn't need him to. Outside, the forest pressed close to the den. The wind carried distant howls, a reminder that the world beyond the council still roared with danger. Faye's emerald eyes traced the shadows cast by the trees, seeing the rhythm of life and death interwoven. She thought of Theo, of every boy whose life had been stolen by a curse she could not undo. Elias approached, careful, deliberate. "You held your own," he said. "But you need to understand, power like yours. It isn't just magic. It's a force. It will draw attention, allies and enemies alike." "I know," Faye said quietly, voice steady, but her thoughts flickered to the black hand, the surge of destruction she had nearly unleashed before. "And if I lose control?" Lucas stepped closer, placing a firm hand over hers. His touch grounded her. "Then I'll stop you, like I always will." Elias nodded slowly. "Good. You need that tether. The forest, the wolves, they all respond to intent. But your wolf side, it is still dormant, suppressed for a reason. You need to be careful. One awakening could change everything." Faye swallowed. Her half-wolf blood had always been a quiet shadow, buried by trauma and circumstance. But the pulse of it under her skin, the latent strength, felt like a drumbeat in her chest. She could feel it now, a low growl beneath her calm. Later that night she sat by the riverbed, the moon silver against the water. Lucas crouched beside her, cloak brushing against the grass. No words came immediately. There didn't need to be. Just presence, the quiet understanding between them that had grown over weeks of shared danger and unspoken trust. Her thoughts drifted, unbidden, to Calum. She had seen him in fleeting dreams, visions that tugged at her sleep. Steel-turned crimson eyes, a shadow of what had been. A man who had known Elira intimately, who had known her before she was even born. That knowledge was a weight she carried silently. The water rippled as a fox appeared, moving along the bank with careful steps. Its gaze met hers, bright and curious. Faye extended a hand, letting her magic brush against the animal. A subtle shimmer ran across its fur, healed, aware, alive. A quiet reminder of what she could do. Lucas's voice broke her reverie. "You're thinking about him again." She looked at him, emerald against the night. "Calum, my father, what he did, what he became. I see it sometimes in dreams. I can feel it even when I wake." He nodded, understanding more than words could say. "And it scares you." "Sometimes," she admitted, "but it also warns me. I won't be him." A small smile brushed his lips. "I know, and you won't have to face it alone." The night deepened, carrying with it the quiet chorus of the forest, but even as the moon rose high, a shadow lingered beyond the trees. A faint pulse of magic, deliberate and precise, like a heartbeat from another realm. Faye sensed it instantly. A signal, a challenge, the unmistakable trace of someone who had learned the same craft she had inherited, someone who knew her bloodline. Her pulse quickened. She looked at Lucas. "He's coming," she whispered. "Who?" "Calum," she said, the name tasting like fire and ash. "He's alive. 30 years. 30 years of learning, of planning. And now, he's returning to claim what he believes is his." Lucas's jaw tightened. "We'll stop him. Together." Faye drew in a breath, feeling the stir of her wolf side beneath the calm she had cultivated. It was patient, biding its time, and the magic in her veins pulsed in response, ready, waiting, dangerous. "We need to prepare," Elias said from behind, quiet but firm. "He won't come alone, and the spells he's mastered, they're not like anything you've seen." Faye's hands clenched into fists, though she didn't feel the panic that usually accompanied her power. Instead, she felt a strange clarity. The past, the dreams, the visions, they weren't warnings. They were instructions. Lucas leaned closer, voice low. "Whatever happens, you're not just a witch. You're not just a wolf. You're both. And I'll be here when you need me to remind you of that." The words were simple, but they carried weight. A promise. A tether of trust that the forest itself seemed to respect. Above them, the stars glimmered, indifferent and eternal. But Faye's gaze stayed on the water, on the shimmer of magic that whispered across its surface, on the future that waited beyond the trees. Calum was coming, and she would face him, not as a pawn, not as a shadow of the past, but as herself. The forest held its breath, and for the first time Faye felt ready to answer it. Chapter 16. The Awakening. The forest was silent. Not the quiet of peace, but the tense hush that comes before a storm breaks. Every leaf, every branch seemed to hold its breath. Faye stood at the center of the spiral grove, palms pressed to the soil, heart thundering. Her magic hummed beneath her skin, low and steady, but restless. From the shadowed tree line, a ripple of air moved unnaturally. The ground trembled. Faye's senses flared. He was here. Calum stepped forward from the mist, taller than she remembered from her visions, cloaked in dark power. His eyes burned with a strange crimson shade, edges like molten gold. The faint hum of magic followed him like a storm cloud. "Faye," he said, voice low and smooth, carrying the weight of 30 years, and every wrong he'd endured. "You've grown, just as I hoped." Faye's hands clenched. "I'm not your hope. I'm not your weapon." Lucas emerged behind her, black fur bristling, teeth bared. "Stay back," his wolf growled. But Faye didn't flinch. She didn't need to. Calum smiled, sharp and cruel. "You think you can stop me? After everything I've learned? After everything I've survived?" The earth shook. Faye felt the old fear, the trauma buried since birth, bubbling to the surface. Her wolf side, a side she didn't know could exist, stirred, restrained by years of instinctual suppression. And then the first strike came. Calum's magic lashed out like fire, scorching the soil, snapping trees in half. Faye's hands rose instinctively. The green energy she had always carried flared, wild and jagged, intertwining with her fear. The air thickened, charged with impossible power. "You can't control me," Calum hissed, and Faye felt the truth in his words. The only one who had ever calmed her during these rare eruptions of destructive magic was Lucas. Lucas lunged to her side. "I've got you," he said, placing himself between her and the attack. He could feel the danger. When Faye's magic surged like this, it wasn't just force, it was annihilation. The next wave of magic tore through the grove. Trees snapped, roots exploded from the earth. Calum's creatures, twisted, shadowed forms from dark witchcraft, poured forward, intent on overwhelming her. But Faye's green light flared brighter, brighter, until it became unbearable. The creatures shrieked, bones cracked. Magic ricocheted through the grove like a living storm, and then her eyes bled emerald. A thin bloodstream traced down her cheeks as her power unleashed in its pure, destructive form. Lucas barely shielded himself, pulling her back, but she was unstoppable. The creatures disintegrated instantly under the force of her unleashed energy. The ground shook violently. Even the forest's roots recoiled. Calum's eyes widened, not fear, but fascination. He had underestimated the child of Elira and himself, the one who had inherited both the fury of the wolves and the untamed magic of the witches. Then, just as the storm of power threatened to consume everything, Faye's form shimmered. White fur rippled over her skin, her bones stretched and cracked, and in a flash, she became the White Wolf. Massive, untamed, majestic, snow-bright against the darkened grove. Emerald eyes burned through the mist, fierce and unyielding. The forest stilled. Even the wind paused to watch. Jared, fully shifted now, circled her, sensing the awakening of her true form. The pack felt it too. The White Wolf among them was their alpha, their protector, and something greater than they had ever known. Faye's voice, still human but laced with power, reached everyone through telepathy. "You don't get to choose me, Calum. Not now. Not ever." Calum laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You are everything I created and everything I destroyed. You cannot defeat me." She crouched low, paws digging into the earth. The blood in her eyes shimmered like emerald fire. "I'm not who you think I am. I'm more. I'm both worlds. And you cannot take that from me." The battle began in earnest. Magic collided with raw power, shadow against green light, fire against snow. Calum summoned the dark knowledge he had stolen from Elira's own teachings, but Faye moved with instinctive precision, every leap and strike guided by her wolf senses. Lucas, in his wolf form, ran beside her, covering her flanks, redirecting attacks when the White Wolf surged too close to losing control. The bond between them pulsed like a lifeline. The creatures around them disintegrated under the dual assault of her magic and his ferocity. Every strike of her paws and claws was precise, devastating yet deliberate. She didn't want destruction. She wanted endurance, balance, justice. Finally, the last creature fell, and Calum staggered back, breathing hard, amber gold eyes wide. He had underestimated the combination of her magic, her wolf instincts, and the sheer force of someone who refused to be controlled. Faye, still in her white wolf form, stepped forward. Magic pulsed in the air around her like lightning trapped in a cage. "This ends now, Calum." The grove shook one last time. The energy of her blood, her wolf instincts, and her magic collided, anchoring the forest in her presence. Not his. The shadow that had lingered for decades faltered, cracking like brittle stone. Calum fell to his knees. You are more than I imagined," he whispered, almost admiringly, though defeat shone in every line of his face. Faye's emerald eyes softened, not her power, but her intention. She shifted back slowly, fur fading, returning to human form, still glowing faintly with the edge of the White Wolf. Lucas, who had already shifted back, reached her side immediately with spare clothes. No words were exchanged between. Just his presence was enough for her. Steady. Protective. She looked at him, breathing hard, blood still glimmering in her eyes. "It's done," she said. Lucas nodded. "You were never just a witch. And you're not just a wolf. You're... you." The pack circled cautiously, aware that something monumental had shifted. And at the edge of the mist, Calum's shadow dissolved like smoke, leaving only the knowledge that Faye had surpassed even what he had intended for her. For the first time in decades, the spiral grove was quiet, not scared, not trembling, not bound, but alive. And Faye, standing between the human she was and the wolf she had always been, knew that the world had just begun to bend to her own rhythm. Chapter 17. The Crown and the Teeth. The spiral grove was quiet as dusk settled, the last golden light stretching over the bent and scarred trees. Faye stood at its center, her cloak freshly mended, her palms still blistered from past battles. No crown rested on her head, no staff in her hand. She had come to understand that power wasn't only carried in symbols. Morgana watched from the edge, robes trailing like mist, staff planted firmly in the cracked earth. Her gaze was sharp, assessing, as though she was measuring whether the girl before her could fill the void left by Elira. "The curse is broken," she said quietly, her voice carrying just enough to reach the edges of the grove. "But the forest remembers." Elias stepped forward from the wolf side, calm, but watchful. "So do we." Rourke's jaw tightened as he stepped into the circle, the other wolves behind him. Their black coats like shadows against the red-gold light. "We remember betrayal," he said, voice low. Lucas, fully human now, stood just behind Faye, his presence steady, protective. He didn't look at Rourke. He looked at her. "We remember survival," he said. Faye took a slow breath, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her boots, feeling the subtle tug of magic still lingering from the fights that had scarred this grove. She lifted her hands slightly, and green and gold sparks danced faintly in the air. "Then remember this," she said, voice calm but carrying authority that surprised even her. The wind moved through the trees, stirring the leaves but not disturbing the gathered crowd. Faye's emerald eyes met Lucas's ocean blue ones, and for a heartbeat, the rest of the world fell away. "I'm not Elira," she said. "I'm not Calum." Her voice rose just enough to carry to every corner of the grove. "I'm what comes after." A rustle of surprise ran through the coven and the wolves. No one had expected her to claim it so boldly, so clearly. Rourke shifted, skeptical, but he didn't interrupt. He waited. Elias inclined his head slightly, a rare sign of approval. "You want to lead?" he asked. Faye didn't hesitate. "I already am." The tension in the grove softened, just slightly, as if the forest itself acknowledged her words. The remaining traces of Calum's shadow, faint green sparks and lingering whispers, flickered at the edges of perception, warning that he had not yet been vanquished. But for now, he was silent. Rourke crossed his arms. "Then prove it," he said, voice low, challenge simmering in his tone. Faye's gaze swept over both coven and pack. "Leadership isn't about proof," she said softly, yet firmly. "It's about trust. And I will earn it, because we all survive together, or we all fail alone." A pause stretched across the grove. Even Lucas held his breath, letting her words sink in. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand. Not as a command, not as protection, but as a promise. Later, as twilight deepened, Faye walked to the edge of the riverbed. The water ran clear now, sunlight fading, reflecting streaks of gold and violet across its surface. Lucas followed quietly, the night settling around them like a cloak. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She stopped, letting her cloak fall away from her shoulders, tracing a finger across the smooth surface of a stone. "It's strange," she said, voice barely above the whisper of the river, "to think we've been fighting ghosts for so long." Lucas finally spoke, voice low, teasing almost. "Are we?" Her eyes flicked to him, then back to the river. "I've been waiting for a day where the ghosts don't decide everything. Where we can choose." He stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulders. "Then choose with me," he said simply. Faye smiled faintly, a small curve, fragile but real. "I already did," she replied. The night deepened, cool and quiet. The coven and the pack had dispersed for now, leaving her with the gentle rustle of the forest and the steady presence of Lucas beside her. But in the shadows, at the far edge of her senses, a flicker of green. An echo of Calum's magic reminded her that the crown she claimed today was not yet the end. The forest had bent to survive him before, and it would bend again. But she, for the first time, felt the weight of her own choice. her own power, and the tether that tied her to both worlds. Lucas leaned in slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm listening," she replied, her gaze sweeping the trees, the water, the stars above. "To what comes next." The night was alive with possibility. Not danger, not expectation, but the quiet hum of something waiting, an echo that would become a roar in the days to come. Faye didn't flinch. She had faced monsters before. She had faced grief. She had faced curses. Now she was ready to face what came after. And somewhere, far beyond the borders of the forest, a shadow stirred, green sparks flaring faintly against the darkness. Calum had not forgotten, but neither had Faye. She had the forest. She had the wolves. She had Lucas. And for the first time, she knew what it meant to be more than a survivor. She was a beginning. Chapter 18, The Echo of Power. Faye stepped into the spiral grove. The trees leaned in around her, roots twisting over the ground. The forest felt tense, waiting. Somewhere ahead, Calum was there, watching. Lucas walked at her side, human form, steady. The wolves spread out behind them, alert. They didn't need to speak. They knew what was coming. "He's here," Elias said from the edge of the clearing. His voice was quiet but sharp. "I can feel him." Faye tightened her fists. Her magic stirred low at first, controlled, then started to rise, like a pulse under her skin. She could feel the fear in the forest, the hesitation in the trees. A figure stepped from the shadows. Calum, his hair dark as ash, eyes turned back to stormy gray. His cloak moved like smoke, magic curling around him. "Faye," he said, calm, almost mocking. "So this is what came from Elira's blood." "You don't get to decide what grows," she said, emerald eyes locked on his. Calum smiled faintly. "I've waited 30 years for this. 30 years to reclaim what was stolen. You cannot stop me, child of my blood." Lucas glanced at her. "We'll see about that," he said, quiet but firm. Faye felt her magic stir, and then a white glow beneath her skin. The wolf inside her, suppressed for so long, was waking. "You're not just a witch," Lucas said softly, repeating the words she had whispered to him before. Faye nodded, drew a deep breath, and stepped forward. "Then let's end this." Faye's hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "You can't control this place," she said. The ground beneath them was dark, alive. The soil pulsed with memory, not just of the forest, but of all who had fallen. Theo, her mother, Elira. Calum's eyes flicked toward the graves at the edge of the grove. "They were weak," he said. "And you? You think you're stronger?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The forest shifted, roots curling up as if to defend her. Leaves whispered in warning. Her wolf instincts flared, suppressed for so long, now rising in tandem with her magic. Lucas stepped closer. "Faye," he murmured, "let me be with you." The forest's hum grew louder, and she felt it, not as a pulse in the ground this time, but as a presence. And then she saw it. Her reflection in the air, the glow spreading from her, her wolf form, white as moonlight, emerging around her. Fur bristled along her back, powerful, pure, unstoppable. Faye's emerald eyes met his storm-gray gaze. "I'm not hiding anymore," she said. With a sharp exhale, she let her magic flow. Not controlled, not gentle, but roaring through her. Lucas moved at her side, shifting into his black wolf form, muscles tense, eyes locked on Calum. He let out a low growl. "We face him together." Calum raised his hands, magic crackling like dark fire around him. "Together? You? You think a child of my blood can stop me? Faye stepped forward, white fur glowing, claws digging into the soft earth. I'm not just your child, she said. I'm everything you didn't count on. The air vibrated as she let her power ripple outward. Black veins, jagged, twisted like shadows, reached across the ground from her hands, thrumming with the force of her anger, her grief, her hope. The forest groaned, not in fear, but in recognition. This magic was hers, born of love and loss, and she would not be subdued. Calum staggered back, caught off guard. For the first time in decades, he felt hesitation. Lucas bared his teeth, circling, ready to strike. Don't underestimate her, he growled. Not now. Not ever. Faye's eyes blazed. The memories of the children, of Theo, of all the lives lost under his curse, rose in her mind. Her wolf side surged completely. Powerful and unbound, Calum threw a spell. A dark wave meant to crush her, but she deflected it instinctively, her magic exploding outward. Trees shook, leaves scattered, and a howl rose from the forest itself. Calum's magic faltered under the sheer force of her unleashed power. She bled through her eyes, a shimmer of emerald against the shadow of his storm-gray gaze, but she did not weaken. She could feel Lucas beside her, steady, unafraid. Only he could calm her if she lost control entirely, and his presence anchored her just enough. I won't let you win, she shouted. Not here, not ever. Calum's expression darkened. Then die, knowing what you cannot escape, he said, lunging forward. Faye shifted fully into her white wolf form, towering, majestic, and terrifyingly strong. She met him head-on, claws ready, teeth bared. Lucas leapt beside her, black fur blending with shadows, strength and loyalty embodied. The battle erupted, a clash of magic and fury. Sparks flew, earth cracked, and the air roared. Every strike of Faye's white form sent ripples through the forest. Every movement of Calum's dark magic threatened to tear the grove apart, but she held firm, untamed, unstoppable. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The forest leaned in, watching. Even the graves at the edge seemed to hum, the souls of the lost lending her strength. Then, with one final surge, Faye unleashed everything. Calum stumbled, staggering under the wave of white wolf power, magic clashing against magic. The darkness cracked, splintered, and his storm-gray eyes widened in disbelief. Faye's magic flared, jagged, precise, unstoppable. Lucas leapt, landing beside her as she pushed forward. And then, Calum fell. The forest exhaled, not in relief, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. The curse was broken, but not with chains or tethers. It ended with the choice of the girl who had become more than her bloodline, more than the fears of the past. Faye shifted back, human again, knees brushing the mossy ground, hair messy, eyes still glowing faintly. Lucas lowered himself beside her, covering her with a cloak. You did it, he murmured. You really did it. Faye exhaled, chest heaving. We did it, together. Chapter 19. What Grows After Fire. The forest was alive. Faye walked through the spiral grove, bare feet brushing soft moss, the early sunlight scattering through the branches. Her magic hummed gently, steady, no longer wild. She could feel the soil beneath her hands, the roots beneath her fingers, not as a tether to control, but as a friend, an old companion finally at peace. The trees had straightened, branches no longer bent unnaturally. The wounds of Calum's chaos were still visible, scars in the bark, patches of ash and blackened earth, but life had returned slowly, patiently, just as it always would. Morgana approached from the center of the grove, her staff lightly tapping the ground. Her robes were dusted with dew, and her eyes were sharper than the morning light. "You didn't bind it," she said. Not accusation. Observation. Respect. Faye nodded. "I listened." Morgana's gaze swept the grove. "And it chose you." Faye felt the weight of that word settle on her. Chosen. Not by prophecy, not by birthright, not by power alone, but by the forest itself, by every life she had healed, every soul she had honored, every grief she had carried. She had become something new, something more. Lucas stood at the edge of the grove, arms folded, eyes on the winding river. He didn't speak yet. He didn't need to. Faye approached him slowly. "You're quiet," she said, voice soft but teasing. "I'm watching," he replied, "waiting for you to realize something important." "What?" "That you're not alone." She smiled, a real one this time, full of warmth she hadn't felt in years. She sat beside him, shoulders brushing. His hand found hers easily, naturally. The coven had gathered at a respectful distance, elders and witches alike. The wolves lingered at the edges of the forest, alert but calm. No ceremonies, no proclamations. Just trust, just acknowledgement. Elias stepped forward, half witch, always loyal, always steady. "She's not a Lyra," he said. His voice carried quietly over the grove. "She's not Kylam." "Good," Marin added simply, nodding. "She's what we needed." Faye pressed her palm to the soil again. The earth pulsed gently beneath her touch. Not power, not destruction. Peace. Rourke came quietly to stand behind her. He said nothing. He never apologized, never acknowledged her directly. But he stayed. That was enough. Lucas shifted, leaning closer. "You still feel it?" Faye nodded. "Every day." "And us?" he asked softly, eyes on hers. "Especially us," she whispered. The river flowed clear now, winding through stone like it had always belonged. The wolves drank freely from its banks. The coven moved among the trees, no borders, no tethers, just life, and they were part of it all. Not rulers' shadows, but participants in something bigger. She thought of the boy, Theo, and the others. Of her mother, of Alira, of every life lost to the curse. Their memories no longer weighed like chains. They had become roots, supporting the life around her. Lucas leaned in, brushing her hair from her face, lips pressing briefly to her temple. "Between power and peace," he murmured. Faye let herself laugh softly, a sound that carried over the grove. "I chose both," she said. And the forest didn't whisper anymore. It sang. Faye listened, and this time she understood. Not just the trees, not just the animals, not just the magic. She listened to the balance of life itself, the laughter of children playing beyond the borders, the rustle of humans and wolves and witches moving in the world together, the pulse of a life rebuilt after fire. She wasn't the witch who ruled, nor the daughter of a tyrant who sought to bind everything to his will. She wasn't just a half-wolf, nor just the girl who survived. She was something new, a bridge between worlds, a guardian of both, a listener who healed more than wounds. Faye rose, hair trailing in the sunlight, emerald eyes bright. Lucas mirrored her movement, black fur catching the morning light as he shifted back into human form, tall, steady, beside her. Together they walked forward side by side, into the grove. The ashes of the past lay quiet beneath the soil, and new life had begun. The forest didn't whisper. It remembered. And Faye stepped forward, not as a weapon, not as a witch, not as a child of blood and betrayal, but as a girl who had learned to listen, to trust, to heal. to love. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt possible. The end.